And halfway through, I went, I was just out. Right.
Rhinoceros! Okay, so what does it mean to err? What does it feel like? And why are people avoiding it? Nobody intends to err. When we err, it's by accident. It's when our initial intention doesn't match what we get, when our opinions, beliefs, and actions don't reflect on the world's reality. Realizing that you are wrong, it can be devastating. It can be embarrassing, and it can be uncomfortable. This relates to our attachment with our own rightness. The feeling of being right, it just feels so good, like knowing and understanding everything. This is a social and practical issue, and it starts from school, where you're taught that your performance is tested, and the answer is either right or wrong. And this sort of makes a connection in our brains that mistakes are bad, and we're not taught how to interpret and use our errors. It's a matter of when you're wrong, it's either because you're lazy or you're stupid. And yeah, confrontation with your error, it can be hard. A mistake is unfamiliar territory, and it's this element of the unknown that terrifies us, and what also has hidden inside, like very important pieces of information. Therefore, stepping outside that comfortable space of our error, overcoming the fear of being wrong, basically, and entering the exhilarating world of error and embracing it is what will allow us to explore all the possibilities that arise from this.
Errare humanum est. That means to err is human. It's natural. It's only another one of our functions. It's as much as breathing, sleeping, or eating. So, what is the error? By the errorists, what they mean by error is when you have a specific intention at the beginning, and the result you get from your action diverges from your initial intention. But yet, errors are not that simple. Errors are strange creatures because they don't have an existence on their own. Errors, they only exist in relationship to expectations. So you need a first expectation to have an error. You need to break and disrupt from expectations. Errors are those people who make mistakes and persistently and consistently repeat them. And by some eyes, they can be seen as being wrong or being foolish by common sense people. But again, errors is not about being right, and it's not about common sense. It's about absurd, it's about disruption, it's about breaking through, it's about liberation, it's about uncertainty, because only through uncertainty we can find real knowledge and really real understanding.
Yes, so here, as you can see, is the reference, and on the right, the work produced. So the technique used is the imitation. So why imitation? Because imitation, as Morphoerrorist, is a great technique to lead to error, because perfect imitation doesn't exist. So then imitation will constantly lead to a certain form of error. So we can kind of divide the type of error. So we use the technique imitation to create error. But there's different causes of why an error can occur. So for example, in this example, the participant had some pressure. So when you got some pressure, then you're more likely to make error. You can have a lack of knowledge because you didn't train enough, so then you can't reproduce and imitate in the right way. You can have also your psychological state. So for example, stress, fatigue can kind of undermine and lead to more error. And finally, a sense of distractions. So that can be the causes and for making error in this example. And then the causes can be divided into different types. So, for example, physiological or psychological, or also anthropometric. So, what is physiological is the study of the environment and how the environment kind of affects your body, affects humans. So, for example, the low temperature, the high temperature. So that can be seen also in this example. The psychological, I think everyone knows. And finally, the anthropometric ones, that is the size, the type, or the shape of the human. So that can be also seen in this example. They don't have the same size, they don't have the same shape. So the imitation then becomes more difficult. So another example as well of kind of type of error can be interpretation. So in error, the reference / goal or expectation is important, because especially when you want to judge or evaluate an error. So in this task, for example, there were no clear reference. The first drawing was drawn like without any reference in mind, just a shape like this. And then the participant had to interpret the first drawing in different manners, so to add their subjectivity into it. So we can then understand that error can be also something really subjective, and that everyone can interpret in different ways. So within this example, we can kind of ask which drawing or drawings is or seen as error if the reference has no specific meaning. So that was more like an opening question.
The next experiment carried out included a series of straight lines. It was a very simple and straightforward experiment where the error was pretty much inevitable and still unintentional though. So the participants had to draw out straight lines, and of course because of the lack of the appropriate tools, the error was created. This resulted in the visual confrontation of your error, because you're observing it as you are creating it. This later on led to creating the same experiment, but copying the error of the previous line. So the error sort of accumulates, and it was realized that this is sort of a way to create divergence. And this actual confrontation is like the first process that you have to go through when you're faced with error. So it starts with acknowledging that you have erred, then understanding it, then evaluating it and analyzing it, and then moving on to accepting it, and then from there you transform and see what you can do with it.
1,
2, 3.
1,
2,
1,
2,
1,
2,
3,
4,
5,
6, 7,
8,
9,
10,
11,
12,
1,
2,
1,
2,
3,
4,
1,
5,
It was good.
1,
2,
3,
4, 5,
6,
7, 8,
9,
10,
11, 12,
13.
14,
15,
16,
17,
18.
19.
20.
Game 20 was the basis of most of the experiments carried out by the Morphoerrorists. It sort of creates this harmonization between the group, and it creates this momentum. It sort of creates this bond within the team. And it was basically the basis for other experiments. So we wanted to apply the same technique through a different medium. And here you can see how it was carried out through typing. So the participants were trying to type the word morphoerrorism on a Google Doc through 5 different laptops at the same time. So you can see how the lack of communication resulted in multiple errors. And it took a total of 62 minutes to actually accomplish that. But morphoerrorists did not give up.
Just to write for 1 word.
Yeah. moving on, the same technique was sort of applied in a more architectural manner, something a bit more physical, where a wall was trying to be built, basically. But the error was produced because of the lack of the appropriate tools, and maybe the lack of assertiveness and lack of knowledge. But we can see how through the appropriation and how we adapted the game 20, how it was managed to build this wall.
So of course the creative error, the creative outcome coming from error is not new. The sole discovery of the American continent was an error in itself. They thought they had arrived to Asia or the Indies. Or, for instance, the work of Manet was considered an error by everyone of his time. Alexander Fleming, who discovered and isolated penicillin, he did it after leaving his lab completely untidy and going on holiday with his family. So a contemporary example could be Philip Stark and his dysfunctional design. And even cogito ergo sum, so Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am, it was formed similarly to something that existed 1200 years before. Something St. Augustine said, fallor ergo sum, I err, therefore I am.
There are many agents that are operating on bases of error around the globe, starting from the cabaret, the Argentinian troupe that performed the cabaret in Istanbul in 2013, followed by Brussels musicians duo that called themselves Errorism, and they perform and experience with music and how to accumulate sounds. Australian animators were making cartoons and animations to highlight fails and errors in different actions in a funny way. And Glasgow, an artist has made a booklet that is comically showing the errors in a funny way. But not as those agents. The hub that was created in the design department in Goldsmiths is dealing with Morphoerrorism, an error, taking the error as a system, creating more systems out of it from that root to create more opportunities and desired outcomes in a more erroristic way.
As the first error is the one stated before, they are more interested on making errors. When they make errors, they acknowledge them and they use them. But as Morphoerrorists, they are most interested in the structure of an error, in the shape of an error. So first thing they did was to divide the error in its causes. Like human error has normal and recurrent causes. So by acknowledging this system, we're able to create a way to control errors and make them into something that can be replicated in many situations. As the other structure that was researched was the structure of how an action, what are the elements in an action that can take something to become an error. So here we can see you have the previous intention, which was the thing that the person imagined. You have the agent itself, which can lead to many errors by lack of knowledge, lack of communication, any one of those distractions, lack of teamwork, stress or fatigue. And then you have the tools. You can always have inappropriate tools to do something, like in the example from the walls. So they were trying to build a wall with inappropriate tools and without communication. It was destined to be a mistake. And then you can have, as the first experiment shown, you can have an outcome being not a mistake itself because everything was done as it was intended, but it is misinterpreted by the people who are looking at it, and all of them have different interpretations. It's not that it's a mistake in itself, it's a mistake of interpretation of a third person. Therefore, it's only a judgment. So, by acknowledging these structures, it was possible to plan how to use this into a creative system. It was created then, this kit. It's a kit for something very simple, creating a scale module of an architecture piece. The architecture that was chosen was this cathedral, St. Peter's Cathedral in the Red Square in Moscow. it's a complex one, so it started by there. The intention was completely sabotaged. In 10 minutes, it's not possible with any tools or any kind of materials to produce an accurate model of this. Then the tools were also sabotaged. We gave the participants different tools that did not serve the purpose they intended, by that, therefore generating an error by its own. And then instructions, all the other parts of it, the binders, the volume makers, the tools, they were all sabotaged, and also the instructions. So it is an activity completely destined to fail. Yet, there is something to do when you fail, because as Morphoerrorists, there is a different way to see, what is that other one? As normal people would do, they would take something they believe, a starting point, and they would try to aim somewhere. But as Morphoerrorists, when we take to the wrong point, why normal people would look to the place where they wanted to achieve and actually think in a quite of a nostalgic way, thinking where did I get it wrong? How could I get to the point that I imagined? Morphoerrorists do something quite different. They look, I got to this point, and now what do I do with it? How can I create from it? And that's what we did